All right, everybody, welcome to the show. It is September 12th, 2022. I have quite a bit of interesting news that broke over the weekend that I really need to share with you guys. So first of all, we have a dubious claim from a guy by the name of Steve Bannon. He said that there was a massive raid on basically everybody in Trump's inner circle. We'll dissect it. We'll discuss whether or not we believe it, because it is Steve Bannon, and he's known to be sloppy Steve, as a former ex-president once called him. Former ex-president, that's a double negative. I think I could just say, as an ex-president once told him. So we also have Elizabeth Warren randomly coming out of nowhere, dropping a phenomenal piece of legislation. It's been a long time since we've been able to give Elizabeth Warren credit on anything. She, of course, totally torched her entire reputation when she decided to torpedo Bernie in the 2020 presidential race, in the primary, I should say. We also have Twitter is now nuking accounts that say impolite things to the Queen. And later on in the show, Bill Maher decides to go all in on the both sides arguments. He's mad that Biden's speech called out the right, and he wants him to call out the left more. And I also have a Hail Mary legislation attempt from the Democrats. Joe Biden is trying to resurrect the child tax credit, which, if you guys remember, that was the piece of legislation that cut child poverty temporarily by 40%. And as a lot of people pointed out, well, hold on now. If you could just casually reduce child poverty by 40%, then that means child poverty is a policy choice, and you could eliminate it if you just had the desire to eliminate it. But of course, not only did we not eliminate it, it expired, and child poverty shot right back up. Now, that you can put the blame squarely on Republicans, and perhaps Joe Manchin. I think he may have tanked that as well. But the Democrats are trying to revive that. So a lot of interesting stuff to get to. Let's go ahead and jump into it now. So here is Steve Bannon. He was on Charlie Kirk's show. Now, I think this is right before Steve was arrested in New York. I'm going to get to, a discussion on some of the specifics on that in a minute. But Bannon makes a very interesting claim here, and we'll dissect it. Let's go.
That's one of the best days of my life. It was a very powerful spiritual day for me. It was, a lot of things were, came into high clarity. I was totally in the zone, as you say, in sports the entire time. And, they're not going to shut me up. We see
So I don't know. Is he referring to when he got arrested, saying it was one of the best days of my life? Because I thought he recorded this before he got arrested. Unless he got arrested and then he was able to get out, and eventually he'll be going back in. I'm not sure.
I saw from the demonic speech that Biden gave in Philadelphia. Exactly. This is a
demonic speech. With Steve Bannon, you don't know if he's being literal or if he's being metaphorical. You don't know, because he never gave me extremely fundamentalist religious vibes, but I could be wrong on that.
Dying regime. That was a primal scream. And here, what they're trying to do, no matter who it is, Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago, there were 35 FBI raids yesterday, right? Handing out, there's another grand jury coming together on January 6th. The Washington Post reported it. They just reported a couple names. There were 35 senior members of MAGA, Republicans, supporters of Donald Trump, that were the FBI rolled in on, right? When they didn't need to do it. Remember, all these people have lawyers. All their lawyers are very well known. No. The jackbooted Gestapo has got to show up at their door and make a big display of this. So there's so much going on that people don't even know.
Okay. So his claim is 35 different senior members of MAGA were arrested. So like Trump's inner circle. The question is, do you believe him? I'm going to go ahead and say no. I think there's a grain of truth in what he's saying, but I think he's almost certainly overstating it because he's Steve Bannon, and Steve Bannon lies like a rug. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's 5, 6, 10, maybe 12 people in Donald Trump's inner circle who were either raided, or maybe it's a little softer than that, and they were, mandated to turn over their cell phones, or they were subpoenaed or whatever. in relation to one of the many investigations into Trump. But 35 of them? No. And here's why I don't believe him, because, the media's been all over every aspect of the Trump raid and everything going on around Trump in terms of the various crimes, like what's happening in Georgia, where, he made the phone call, find me 11,000 votes. And Rudy Giuliani is now criminally investigated there. So there's a lot of stuff going on that the media is all over. And we haven't heard basically any reporting on even one of these senior members of Trump's inner circle who was just raided or, law enforcement did something with. So, I wouldn't be surprised if there were some that was the case, but I don't think it's 35. He's Steve Bannon. He's lying. So now, why was he recently arrested? Well, the answer is simple. Remember when he was up on federal charges over the Build the Wall scam? For those of you who don't remember that, he started a GoFundMe campaign with this guy named Brian Kolfage, another right-wing activist. And the idea behind that campaign was, hey guys, donate your money, and what we're going to do is take it and build the southern border wall, build Trump's wall. And they raised millions and millions and millions of dollars. Now, the problems with this are obvious. There should be red flags popping up in your mind everywhere, because you can't privately fund a public border wall. I mean, there's thousands of miles on the southern border. Thousands. Is the argument that Steve Bannon says we're going to buy up all of the land on the border? A lot of the land you can't even buy. I mean, there's some areas where there is private land that goes right up to the border, but a lot of the area is it's not privately owned. So it's just public land. So you can't do that. That's not a thing. You can't privately fund a public border wall. They claim that's what they were going to do. Of course, they took the money, and Brian Kolfage bought like a yacht, and they stole millions of it. They made some claim that was preposterous on their page that like 100% of the proceeds or like 99% of the proceeds or whatever is going to go directly to the border wall. They have Dickie McGeezax to show for it. So bottom line is, he was scamming people. Well, he got caught, and he got brought up on federal charges. And what Trump did is he pardoned him. Why? Because that's Sloppy Steve. That's his buddy. He's a Trump loyalist, so Trump looked out for him. Now, here's the problem with that. If you are president, you can pardon people, but you can only do it for federal crimes. So if a state decides to bring up charges against you, well, you're assed out, dog. Like, it could be a wrap. And so New York brought him up on the charges. And Crystal told me that they actually changed a law in New York to allow prosecutors to go after Steve Bannon. Because I think some semblance of double jeopardy applied because it's the same crime. But technically, if they just changed the law, it wouldn't apply because a state-level crime is different from a federal crime. And so they tweaked a law, and then they were able to bring him up on charges. And that is exactly what they're doing. And so the thing that's hilarious is that as Sloppy Steve is being, dragged out in handcuffs, there's video of all this. I didn't pull it up for the segment, but he's acting like he's some sort of hero and he's some sort of martyr. And he's like, they're never going to take me down. They'll have to kill me before they shut me up. He said something to that effect. And it's like, my dude, you committed fraud on a massive scale. And I get that this audience that you targeted is perhaps not the brightest, but there's something incredibly ironic about trying to posture as a hero to the exact same crowd you defrauded. And that's what Steve Bannon did. So he is quite a character, to say the least. Is he going down for real skis? I'm saying absolutely. There's no doubt about it. Now, in terms of the potential raids here of 35 different senior members of MAGA, I don't know. And this is a question that we were discussing internally. So is it true? Is it not true? Now, let's assume for a second it is true. What exactly were those Trump officials investigated for? What were they raided for? And in all seriousness, it could be any of the 1,000 cases that involve Trump now. So another thing that we didn't do a separate segment on the show, but the news broke maybe 4 or 5 days ago, is that now Trump's Save America PAC is being investigated as well. Why is that PAC being investigated? Because that's where Trump stole $250 million from his supporters, $250 million, and said, hey, this is going to the Stop the Steal effort. It's going to, legal challenges and things of that nature. And then none of the money went there. None of it. I mean, again, he's just defrauding his own supporters. So that's now being investigated too. Look, whether or not Trump will go down over that one is a different question, because the fact of the matter is the way the organization is set up, you might have somebody else who was responsible for the organization and allocating the money who would go down. It wouldn't necessarily be Trump himself, right? But there's an investigation into that. Some of the raids could have, if they happened, could have been around that. Some of the raids could have been around the Georgia case, where they did election interference, did the fake electors panel. Again, Rudy Giuliani's being criminally investigated over that. Some of it could be about the New York case into Trump's businesses, where, the argument is he committed tax fraud and insurance fraud, and he's sort of caught dead to rights on a number of fronts. Although I don't know if there's a statute of limitations that might limit how far they can go in that, but that's just a civil case. It's not a criminal case. So worst case scenario, he gets the corporate death penalty, but he could also be fined quite a bit of money. So we don't know. But assuming what he's saying is true, we don't know if it's about any of the things I just mentioned, or if it's about the documents that Trump had, the classified and top secret documents, which of course he was not permitted to have, and he lied about turning over, all of them when he didn't. And now we know some of them were nuclear documents, and they were so top secret that they were kept in a skiff room, in a safe in the skiff room, which is like having a double locked up. So I don't know. I don't know if Sloppy Steve is telling the truth here. My gut instinct tells me he's greatly exaggerating something with a grain of truth in it. But remember, this is literally a guy who was just, brought up on fraud charges. And by the way, he is as guilty as anybody could ever be, ever. I mean, what's amazing to me is, it appears like among his followers, there's not even, questions about what happened. When the plain face reading of the facts of the situation are clear. You took millions of dollars, said you're going to spend it on a border wall. You didn't spend it on a border wall. And your buddy Brian Colfage bought a yacht and a whole bunch of shit, and you stashed a bunch of money yourself. So anyway, and look at this. I feel like this is so indicative of a trend here too, because Charlie Kirk is interviewing him, and of course it's a softball interview. And it's like, hold on now. Does Charlie Kirk not know that this guy's a con artist? That he's a scammer? Does he not? Of course he knows that. So Charlie Kirk, who's supposed to be a more mainstream type Republican, the head of Turning Points USA, the youth outreach organization for right-wing politics, he's snuggling up to this guy who's a con man. And there's a lesson there about, the mainstreamification of the Trump wing of the Republican Party. And how, at the very least, they cuck themselves and bend the knee if they're not fully in agreement with the Trump wing. Even somebody like Ben Shapiro, who originally did not support Donald Trump and had to be dragged kicking and screaming in the 2016 election to finally support him, even he eventually bent the knee. And so there's this in politician circles, in elite circles, and in media circles. I mean, these people have been totally cucked, even though we're talking about obvious criminals and con men who are being investigated for 412 different crimes. So there's definitely a lesson in there, and it ain't a good one. But Sloppy Steve dropping some potential information here, which could make things extra spicy, and I'm looking forward to it. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.